Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel General Hospital today. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The air in the garden of the Port Charles Athletic Club was thick with the perfume of roses, gardenias, and unadulterated joy. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of ancient oak trees, dappled the assembled guests in shifting patterns of gold and green. Every chair was filled, every face turned toward the flower-strewn archway under which Sonny stood, a man transformed. The usual granite set of his jaw had softened into a look of such profound, vulnerable anticipation that it was almost disorienting to those who knew him as a force of nature, a power to be feared. Today he was simply a man waiting for his future. At his side, his best man Jason Morgan offered a rare, almost imperceptible smile. It was a quiet signal of approval, of shared history, and of a hard-won peace that seemed finally to be within their grasp. In the front row, Sonny's mother, Mike Corbin's widow, wept silent, happy tears while his children, Michael and Jocelyn, watched with beaming pride. It was a picture of familial unity, a testament to the fact that even the most fractured of lives could be pieced back together into something beautiful and whole. The soft, soaring notes of the wedding processional began, and a collective quiet sigh went through the crowd. All heads turned, and there she was, Carly Corinthos, in a gown of ivory silk that seemed to capture the very sunlight, a vision of radiant, unstoppable love. Her walk was steady, her eyes locked on Sonny's, and in that gaze was 2 decades of history. A tempestuous ocean of passion, betrayal, separation, and an undeniable magnetic pull that had always drawn them back to one another. This wasn't a young woman's naive dream. It was a mature, powerful choice to recommit to a love that had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger for it. She reached his side and he took her hands, his thumbs stroking her knuckles. The world around them seemed to blur and fade. The officiant, a gentle-faced man who had known them both for years, began with a warm smile. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness and celebrate the union of Sonny and Carly. A union that many of you know has been a long time in the making. A story of resilience and a love that has endured." He spoke of second chances, of the strength found in forgiveness, and of building a future on the foundation of a shared past. The vows were exchanged, personal and heartfelt, each word a brick laid in the fortress of their new beginning. Sonny's voice, usually a graveled command, was tender as he promised to be her shelter, her partner, her unwavering support. Carly's, often sharp and defiant, was thick with emotion as she vowed her loyalty, her love and her forever. "If anyone present can show just cause why this man and this woman should not be joined in marriage," the officiant recited, the traditional, often ignored line rolling smoothly off his tongue, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." It was a formality, a beat of silence, filled only with the chirping of birds and the happy, expectant breathing of the guests. The officiant smiled, ready to move on to the pronouncement. Then a voice cut through the tranquility, calm, yet carrying an unnerving, resonant weight from the back of the garden. "I can." The 2 words were not shouted, but they had the impact of a physical blow. A collective, sharp intake of breath swept through the rows of guests. Sonny's head snapped up, his body instantly coiling from groom to protector, his eyes narrowing as he searched for the source of the interruption. Carly's grip on his hands tightened, her face a mask of confusion and dawning anger. Jason was already on his feet, his posture shifting into that of a bodyguard, his gaze scanning for a threat. The crowd parted, a sea of bewildered faces turning to stare as a man stepped into the aisle. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored, dark charcoal suit that spoke of money but not ostentation. He was perhaps in his late 50s or early 60s, with silver-streaked hair at his temples and a bearing that was both elegant and imposing. His face was lined with the evidence of a life fully lived, but it was his eyes that captured the attention. They were a piercing, intelligent blue, and they held a gravity that silenced the murmurs beginning to ripple through the assembly. He was a stranger to most, but there was an unsettling familiarity in his features, a ghost of a memory that no one could quite place. "Who the hell are you?" Sonny's voice was low, a controlled rumble of thunder, the old dangerous persona surfacing through the groom's veneer. The man continued his slow, deliberate walk down the aisle until he was standing a mere 10 feet from the stunned couple. He didn't look at the guests. His focus was entirely on Sonny and Carly. My name, he said, his voice calm and measured, devoid of malice but filled with an unshakable resolve, is James Forsyth. And I am here because this marriage is based on a lie. A lie that, if allowed to continue, would be a profound injustice. Carly found her voice first, her temper flaring. I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but you need to leave. Now. She looked past him toward Jason, a clear signal to remove the man. Jason took a step forward, but James Forsyth raised a hand, not in threat, but in a gesture that demanded a moment. What I have to say isn't for the whole world, Sonny, but it is for you and for Carly. And it concerns the very foundation of your relationship. It concerns the paternity of one of your children. The garden went utterly silent. The birds seemed to have stopped singing. You could have heard a rose petal drop. Michael, sitting in the front row, stiffened, his own complicated paternity history flashing in his mind. Jocelyn looked from her mother to the stranger, her face pale with confusion. Sonny took a step forward, placing himself slightly in front of Carly. You have 3 seconds to get to the point before you're removed, he said, each word a chip of ice. The point, Forsyth said, his gaze shifting from Sonny's furious face to Carly's bewildered one, and then back. Is that your son? Morgan Corinthos is not your son. A wave of gasps, louder this time, more shocked, echoed through the garden. Sonny looked as if he'd been struck. Morgan. His son. His vibrant, troubled, beloved boy who had been stolen from them too soon in a tragic accident. To drag his memory into this on this day was a sacrilege of the highest order. You're a sick man, Sonny snarled, the control in his voice beginning to fracture. Jason. I have the DNA tests, Forsyth interrupted, his voice still calm, but now laced with a steel that commanded attention. He didn't brandish papers, but the certainty in his tone was more powerful than any document. Run through 3 independent, reputable labs. All with the same result. The Y chromosome markers do not match yours, Sonny. Morgan was not your biological child. Carly let out a strangled cry. That's a lie. How dare you? Morgan was his son. You don't get to come here and desecrate my son's memory. Her voice broke, tears of rage and grief springing to her eyes. The horror of the accusation was secondary to the violation of her child's legacy. I am not desecrating his memory, Carly, Forsyth said, and his use of her first name was intimate, knowledgeable. I am trying to clarify it. For everyone. Who then? Sonny roared, the sound echoing in the quiet space. If this insane story has a point, who? Who was his father? James Forsyth took a deep breath, and for the first time, a flicker of something akin to pain crossed his composed features. He looked directly at Carly, his gaze intense, searching her face as if looking for a sign of recognition. It was me, he said, the words dropping into the silence like stones into a still pond. I am Morgan's biological father. The world stopped. For Carly, the sounds of the garden, the sight of the guests, the feel of the silk of her dress, everything receded into a dizzying, nauseating blur. She stared at the man, her mind racing, scrambling for purchase. It was impossible. A grotesque, cruel joke. She had never seen this man before in her life. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, that's not possible. It is, Forsyth insisted, his voice softening slightly, as if he understood the nuclear bomb he had just detonated. It was the summer of 2003. You and Sonny were separated. You were vulnerable, lost. We met at a charity gala in New York. You were there representing the Metro Court's interests. We talked for hours. You told me your life was a mess. I was a mess myself, grieving a profound loss. We found solace in each other. It was one night, Carly. A single night that I have never forgotten. Carly's blood ran cold. New York. The charity gala. A period of her life she had deliberately buried. A time of profound loneliness and despair after a brutal separation from Sonny. She had gone to the gala to feel something other than pain, to put on a brave face. The details were hazy, clouded by champagne and heartache. She remembered feeling adrift. She remembered a conversation with a kind, older, strikingly intelligent man. He had listened. He hadn't judged. The evening was a blur of music and forced smiles, and the later part of the night, a dark gap in her memory she had always attributed to drinking too much and the emotional turmoil of the time. She had woken up in her hotel room alone, with a vague, shame-filled recollection of a connection she knew was a mistake. Her face, always an open book, must have shown the dawning, horrifying realization. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her as pale as her wedding gown. Her knees felt weak. She looked from Forsyth's painfully earnest face to Sonny's, which was a terrifying canvas of shock, betrayal, and a fury so deep it was chilling. "Carly." Sonny's voice was barely a whisper, but it was laced with a devastation that was more powerful than any shout. "Is this true? Do you know this man?" She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up. Her mind was a whirlwind of fragmented memories, and a tidal wave of denial. It couldn't be. The timing. Morgan had been born the following spring. She had never, not for a single second, doubted that Sonny was his father. Morgan had his fire, his impulsivity, his heart. The diagnosis of bipolar disorder had only solidified their biological connection in her mind. It was a cornerstone of their shared history, of their grief. "It can't be," she finally managed, her voice trembling. "Morgan was yours, Sonny. He was yours. He had your eyes, your..." "Phenotypes can be deceiving," Forsyth said, not unkindly. "The science is unequivocal. I would not be here disrupting this day, causing this pain, if I were not 100% certain. I have lived with this knowledge for years. I only recently acquired a sample of Morgan's DNA for comparison. When I saw the results, I knew I had a moral obligation to come forward." "Moral obligation?" Sonny laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think this is morality? To come to my wedding, to my son's memory, and do this? What is your game? What do you want?" "I want nothing from you," Forsyth said, his gaze steady. "I am a very wealthy man. I have no interest in your money or your business. This is not about extortion. This is about the truth. My son, the son I never knew, is gone. I never got to hold him. I never got to hear his voice. I learned of his existence only through a private investigator I hired to look into your life after that night. A connection I couldn't forget. By the time I had the courage to dig deeper, it was too late. He was gone." His voice cracked, and for the first time the polished facade broke, revealing a raw, genuine grief beneath. It was this crack, this glimpse of authentic pain, that made the impossible story feel terrifyingly plausible. "I have spent the last few years mourning a child I never knew," he continued, composing himself. "Watching from a distance. Seeing you all celebrate his life, mourn his death. And I was on the outside. A ghost. I couldn't live with the lie anymore. You," he said, looking at Sonny, "have lost a son you believed was yours. I understand that pain is real. But I have also lost a son, and I have been denied the right to even acknowledge him. And you..." His eyes returned to Carly, filled with a complex mixture of accusation and pity. "You kept this from all of us. You built a life on a secret you didn't even know you were carrying." The accusation was the final straw for Carly. The shock began to recede, replaced by a white-hot, defensive fury. "How dare you? I didn't know. Do you think if I had known I would have..." "I would have..." She trailed off, the implications crashing down on her. What would she have done? Told Sonny? A man whose pride and sense of family was everything? In the state their relationship was in then, it would have shattered them forever. It would have denied Morgan the father he adored. The wedding was forgotten. The guests were a silent, stunned audience to the unraveling of 2 decades of truth. Michael had risen to his feet, his arm around a weeping Jocelyn. He looked at his mother, his expression a torrent of conflicting emotions, sympathy, confusion, and a deep, protective anger toward the stranger. "This changes nothing," Sonny said, his voice low and guttural, trying to reclaim control of a situation that had spiraled into chaos. "Morgan was my son. I raised him. I loved him. I held him when he was born, and I mourned him when he died. A piece of paper from some lab doesn't change that. You are nothing to him. You were never anything to him." "Biologically, that is incorrect," Forsyth replied, not backing down. "And it changes everything. It changes Morgan's medical history. His bipolar disorder, it didn't come from you, Sonny. It came from me. My sister suffered from it severely. It changes the very narrative of his life. He was not a Corinthos by blood. He was a Forsyth. The name meant nothing to most, but to a few in the crowd, a flicker of recognition passed through their eyes. The Forsyths were old money, a powerful reclusive family from upstate with interests in pharmaceuticals and private equity. It was a name that carried a different kind of weight than Corinthos. "Get out," Sonny said, the words final and absolute. "Get out of here before I do something we'll both regret." James Forsyth nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing less. He had delivered his truth. The damage was done. He looked one last time at Carly, whose face was a mask of tear-streaked devastation, then turned and walked back up the aisle with the same measured pace with which he had entered. The crowd parted for him once more, their stares now filled with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. He was gone, but his presence lingered like a poison in the air. The second he disappeared from view, the spell of silence broke. The garden erupted into a cacophony of frantic whispers and exclamations. The perfect, beautiful wedding was in ruins. Sonny stood frozen, his back to Carly, his shoulders rigid. He was a statue of betrayed fury. Carly reached a trembling hand out to touch his arm. "Sonny." He flinched away from her touch as if burned. The small, instinctive rejection was more devastating than any shouted accusation. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. "The wedding is over," he announced to no one and everyone, his voice hollow. Without another word he turned and walked away, not toward the reception area, but toward the private path that led to the parking lot. Jason shot a worried look at Carly before following him, his role as protector and friend taking precedence. Carly was left standing alone under the arch of flowers, the abandoned bride in the center of a scandal. The beautiful dress that had felt like a suit of armor now felt like a shroud. Her children rushed to her side, Michael pulling her into a hug while Jocelyn clung to her arm, both trying to shield her from the prying eyes. "Mom, it's okay, we're here," Michael whispered, but his voice was strained. But it wasn't okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. The shocking secret had not just stopped a wedding. It had detonated a bomb at the core of their family, rewriting the past and casting a dark, uncertain shadow over any possible future. The love that had just minutes ago seemed unshakable now felt fragile, built on a foundation of sand that had just been washed away by a tidal wave of truth. The aftermath was a study in quiet devastation. The guests, after a period of awkward, stunned milling, dispersed with hushed, speculative conversations. The vibrant reception, with its band and champagne tower and multi-tiered cake, stood untouched, a monument to a celebration that would never happen. At the Metro Court, in the penthouse that was supposed to have been their first night back as husband and wife, Carly sat on the edge of the sofa, still in her wedding gown, which now felt like a cruel costume. The flowers had been removed. The silence was oppressive. Michael had taken Jocelyn home, promising to check in later. He was struggling with his own turmoil. Morgan had been his brother, his true brother. The idea that they didn't share a father, that the bond he had cherished was genetically a half measure, was a confusing and painful adjustment. Down in the basement of his own dark, secluded home, Sonny stood before the bar, not pouring a drink, but just staring at the bottles, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on the polished wood. Jason was there, a silent sentinel. "She lied to me, Jason," Sonny finally said, the words ripped from a deep, wounded place. "For all those years. She let me believe he was mine." "She didn't know, Sonny," Jason said, his voice even. It was the logical conclusion, the one he had to state. "You heard her. She was as shocked as you were." "Was she?" Sonny turned, his eyes blazing. "How can I be sure? This is Carly. She's the master of the calculated secret, the strategic omission. She looked me in the eye all those years ago when she was pregnant and told me he was mine. Was that the truth? Or was it just what she needed to say to secure her place, to secure our family?" "You can't believe that," Jason argued, though a sliver of doubt, born from a long history of Carly's manipulations, nagged at him too. "Not about Morgan. She loved him. She would never." "I don't know what to believe anymore," Sonny roared, sweeping a crystal glass off the bar with a violent crash. "My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I held through every nightmare, the boy I buried, he wasn't my son. And the woman I was about to pledge my life to. She gave me another man's child and let me live a lie. My entire life, my entire grief is a fraud. Meanwhile, alone in the penthouse, Carly's mind was racing, trying to claw back through the fog of that long-ago night. Fragments came back to her. The kind smile of the man James, his soothing voice, the feeling of being truly heard for the first time in months. She remembered leaving the gala with him, going to a quiet, elegant bar. She remembered talking, crying, and then nothing. A blank space. She had always assumed she had drunk herself into a stupor, and he had kindly put her in a cab. The idea that more had happened, that a life had been created from that lost evening, was a horror she could not comprehend. A soft knock on the door startled her. It was Diane Miller, her friend and attorney, her face grim. "I came as soon as I heard," Diane said, stepping inside and taking in the sight of Carly, still in her wedding dress. "Oh, honey." "Diane, it's not true," Carly pleaded, fresh tears starting. "It can't be." "Whether it's true or not is almost irrelevant at this moment," Diane said, her lawyerly instincts taking over. "The perception is the reality. This man James Forsyth, he's the real deal. Old money, powerful, and by all accounts ruthlessly meticulous. He wouldn't have made this move without irrefutable proof." "What does he want?" Carly cried. "He said he didn't want money." "Perhaps he wants acknowledgement," Diane mused. "Perhaps he wants to claim a piece of the son he lost. Grief makes people do irrational, destructive things. But Carly, you need to think about damage control. With Sonny. With your children. Sonny thinks I lied to him," she whispered, the pain of his rejection fresh and acute. "He wouldn't even look at me." "Give him time," Diane advised, though her tone lacked conviction. "This is a massive shock. It attacks the very core of his identity as a father." The days that followed were a torturous limbo. Poor Charles was buzzing with the scandal. The story was the only topic of conversation at Kelly's, at the hospital, at the Metro Court bar. The tale of the interrupted wedding and the shocking paternity reveal was too juicy to be contained. Sonny refused to take Carly's calls. He disappeared into the workings of his business, using work as a numbing agent, his grief and rage a volatile cocktail that made him more dangerous and unpredictable than ever. He avoided his family, unable to look at Michael and Jocelyn without the ghost of Morgan, and the newly discovered lie haunting him. Carly, after days of weeping and despair, began to get angry. Angry at James Forsyth for his timing, for his cold, calculated revelation. Angry at the universe for its cruelty. And a slow-burning anger at Sonny for his refusal to believe her, for abandoning her in the moment she needed him most.